Okay, so let's start with the rest of the presentation. And first thing we're going to talk about is just document management overall. So the goal that we're after here is a centralized working document storage, making the documents available for everyone based on user rights. Now, someone could say that we already have that with a file server. That's true. We do have centralized storage. We do have it available based on user rights. But let's make some distinctions here. First of all, we attempt to have some organization with a folder structure, which is really the reason that we tell people to save things on a file server. Say, if you put it on the file server in these folders, people will be able to come back and find it. And then, of course, just having it centralized in that way makes it available to everyone. We are able to do our network backups and so on. As far as permissions are concerned, you know that you can have permissions per file or per folder in the network environment. But now let's talk about some of the differences. First of all, you put files in folders on a network file server. They can certainly be difficult to find. I mean, that's a clear benefit that we're after with document management, is just the easy searchability of the product. If I store something in a project folder and someone else goes looking for it in a customer folder, they're not going to find it. Of course, it exists. It's just not where they're expecting to find it. So that means that they're going to waste a whole lot of time trying to find it. They might even go so far as to assume that the file they're looking for doesn't exist. So we definitely want to overcome that aspect. From a permission standpoint, in Windows, you are assigning permissions to folders, and so those permissions to the folders then translate to permissions for the files. You can assign permissions in Windows on a file-by-file basis, but they're going to have to be explicitly defined, meaning that other than the folder that you're saving that file to, you would have to go specify permissions for that file that are different than any other permissions that you have. Now, M-Files overcomes that as well by allowing permissions to be governed not only by the file type, which might be equivalent or similar to the idea of storing certain files of a certain type in certain folders in Windows, so the permissions could be similar to that. But we can also control permissions in M-Files based on the metadata, or the data that we're saving about the document. And so if I were to associate a file with a particular customer or project or particular employee, I could turn permissions on and off automatically based on that information. So that's something that we cannot do in Windows at all. So we definitely get a lot more control from a permission standpoint. We're also going to be making files much more freely available because we're not going to be concerned with location, and we'll get into all of that as we go. From a security standpoint, we're saving it on an M-File server as opposed to a client computer. Again, that's not anything different than what we could do with Windows. However, some questions come up a lot about user adoption with M-Files. Possibly new partners, certainly new customers will say, you know, do you see problems with people starting to use this since it's something new to them? And my question is always, you know, like anything that's new, you have to expect that people, and I don't want to go so far as to use the word resistance, but that people can be much more aware of that change, maybe a little bit reluctant to do something different. However, what I see across the board between partners and customers is that By storing these files centrally and it being so much easier to search for them, the benefits to everyone start to encourage that user adoption. So it's not so much that you have to stay on top of people to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. It gets to the point very quickly that they want to be saving that information, because if I go looking for information and it's easy for me to find it because of what someone else did, then you start to find that people do the same thing for others. Yes, I'm going to go save it here in M files instead of saving it on my desktop in my user folder, because I want other people to know this too. It really goes to the idea of sharing information and collaborating on that information, making it available so that people are able to do their jobs better. And there really is that kind of shared responsibility that goes around. So we see user adoption rates going up dramatically just because of that. And so as people are seeing the benefits, the adoption kind of takes care of itself without it having to be dictated from the top down. The document history being recorded, that's another big thing. In Windows, if you want to document history in multiple versions, you're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to keep multiple copies of the file. It's going to have to be a version 1, version 2, version 3 that you see as part of the title, and you'll have to manage that. M-Files is managing it all for you. You can't even tell that it's happening unless you choose to go access a prior version. So it's not interfering with your work. You're not having to manually control it. Furthermore, from a technical standpoint, if you're doing that in Windows, let's say I've got a 1 megabyte file and I have 10 versions of it, it's going to take up 10 megabytes worth of space in Windows. In M-Files, it's going to take up a fraction of that, and we're going to talk about that more tomorrow in one of our technical sessions as to how various versions are saved. But I can just tell you in summary right now, instead of it being 10 megabytes, you're probably going to be looking at about 1 point something up to maybe 2 megabytes. So it's going to take up a whole lot less space, but allow you to keep these various versions and have it automated for you. And then the last part here, we've kind of already mentioned this, is the fact that the information is produced for the whole organization. The productivity is going to improve. Enhancing competitiveness in the market is just because of that shared information. You know, we are much more aware of and capable of accessing information that we might not have been able to do easily before. Okay, this slide is one that I particularly like because it starts to point out some of the basically just kind of where M-Files fits within the organization. So we're going to take this just from upper left area right here with electronic documents and go clockwise around here. The very top part of this diagram is showing some various ways that information can get into M-Files. So if we talk about electronic documents, for example, those could be your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, AutoCAD, any type of document that you're creating on your computer. So you're able to save those directly to M-Files. One of the things we'll talk about in a minute is the way M-Files integrates into Windows Explorer. Since it integrates into Windows Explorer, it's extremely easy to save any of your electronic documents into M-Files and to continue doing it in the same way you always have, really just choosing File, Save As, and saving to a drive letter. That's one of the distinctions between M-Files and most other document management software, is the fact that it shows up as its own drive. That right there enhances user adoption because you know, we're not asking people to change a whole lot of what they're already doing. If you are already saving to an S drive, then we can have you continue saving to an S drive. So right off the bat, it's not going to change much of what you're doing, just as to how you save or open files. Now, scanners are another obvious piece of this, where if we want to get paper documents into M files. So you have all of your paper documents, you can scan those from a directly attached scanner or a multifunction printer, MFP. So we can scan those directly into the software or scan to a monitored folder or a hot folder and have M files pick up those scanned images from that location. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see an ERP or CRM database. M-Files can connect to most any database that you're going to find in an organization. Specifically, it needs to be an ODBC compliant database, such as SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, Firebird, which is the back-end database for M-Files if you are not using SQL Server. Trying to think what else I might have missed. Probably covered the major databases that you would run into. But again, anything that's ODBC compliant we can connect to. What that means is that if you have customer access, yes, someone asked about access, absolutely. So Access, SQL Server, MySQL, trying to think of another free SQL product besides MySQL. It's escaping me, but in any case, any of the SQL type products, as well as Access, Oracle, Sybase. So anyway, if you have, let's say, customer information, project information, accounting information, and so on, stored in various databases throughout your organization, our goal is to make that information available within M-Files. Now, you can make it available read-only, or you can make it a bidirectional synchronization. But what will happen, let's say if you add a new customer into your CRM system, that customer will show up as data in M-Files. Or if you add a new project in your ERP system, that project will show up in M-Files as data. If you had an HR system and you add a new employee, that employee can show up in M-Files. Now, why is this important? Well, the reason is as you are storing these documents and filing them, categorizing them, you want to be able to categorize them according to some of this data. If you have documents that pertain to a particular employee, a particular customer, for a particular project, and so on, you now have that information available to just choose from lists. So you're not having to type it in, risk mistyping it, putting the wrong name. And again, when somebody goes to search for it, they need to be searching for the correct term and not a misspelled version of that term, an abbreviated version of the term, or however someone might put it in. So it's absolutely going to enforce some data integrity in how that information is going into your document management system. So if we look at now pulling that information out, that's what you get on the bottom part of this diagram. So we can pull information out of M-Files through a publishing portal. That can be a particular website or portal. Even the M-Files web client could function in this way, but basically providing those documents and data to anyone that you want to have access to it. We could have customer-related documents that we push out, whether we're emailing them, posting them to a publishing portal or another website, however we want to make that information available. We could do an electronic archive, so M-Files could have a separate vault or just publish those documents out to an archive to make them available for later use. And then finally, workgroup documentation. So this could go along with a workflow concept, is making those documents available within a workflow to a team, a group of approvers, or some type of business process that's being modeled within M-Files, and to make all of those documents available in that way. So a lot of different ways that information can come in, a lot of different ways that information can go out. So when we look at the document going into M files, we classify it during the save operation. And we're classifying that document to describe what the document is. So this is one of the major differentiators with M files compared to some other document management systems, is that most document management systems will still use a folder-based structure, and then of course in Windows Explorer it would be folder-based. And so in those systems, you have to be concerned with where a file is. You're putting it into a folder. The only way you're going to get back to that in Windows Explorer is to go back to that particular folder. A lot of time can be wasted looking for files by browsing into the wrong folder, having to back out of that and browse to a different folder only to find that you're still in the wrong place. If we classify this with the metadata information that we're talking about, our focus shifts to now be more interested in what that document is and what that document is about rather than where we're putting it. The answer to where is the file when it's in M files is just that. It's in M files. It's as though it's stored in a single bucket and we're putting a bunch of tags on it to classify it. So we could put a piece of paper in a bucket and put a tag on it that says what project it is, and put another tag on it that says who the employee project manager is, and another tag that identifies the customer contact or the type of document. You know, is it a purchase order? Is it a contract? Is it a when I say purchase order, contract, proposal, a project plan? So it could be any of those different types of documents, and any one of those different types of documents we might want to maintain different information about, so we would tag it differently. Well, once we have it in that bucket and we have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of documents in that bucket, how do we pull those back out? We just search for it. You search for projects or proposals or contracts or the particular customer or the particular employee, and we can pull it all out exactly the way we want to, not in folders but into views, which is really just a saved search. So you're going to pull it back and see it basically through a window exactly the way it makes sense to you, and we're going to start to see that as we go through this. So saving the document, when you save it with these tags, can be even much swifter than going through a folder hierarchy. Because if you think about going to save a document, you have to double-click into this folder, double-click into that folder, and you may go down 3, 4, 5 levels into a folder structure. And again, when you see what else is in that folder structure, you might say, well, this really isn't the right place to save it. So you have to back out and go somewhere else. With M files, instead of looking at where you're going to save it, you again just have to be concerned with what you're saving it as, or the type of metadata you're putting on it. And choosing a lot of that information from drop-down lists or entering it very quickly into just some data entry fields can be much quicker than navigating through a folder hierarchy. This classification structure is going to be centrally managed. So if you, for example, were to say that you're saving a purchase invoice, the information that you need to enter about a purchase invoice is going to be controlled by the administrator that says these are the particular properties or fields that you can enter, these are the ones that are required, or these are the ones that you could add to it. So all of that's going to be controlled, which is going to make your data very consistent and keep that control over the structure as to how it's being stored. This is what gives you the consistent data, consistent documents, and keeps it in control of the way that you're going to find it going forward. So we've talked about saving into the M drive. This is the normal way of saving the documents, or into whatever drive letter you want that to be. Then you will specify the particular properties, such as that document type, proposal, purchase invoice, contract, project plan, and so on. And then certain information about the document, the date, the customer, the project, the employee. Now what that's doing for you is, immediate finding, right? Just immediately is the ability to turn around and search on any of those terms. We've talked about the automatic versioning. If I open that file and make changes to it, it will retain version 1 and then allow me to still have version 2, 3, 4, etc., up to as many versions as I want, but it is not taking up a huge amount of disk space as it does that. I also have offline availability, so any of these files that are available on the network through mFiles, I can make them available offline if I were on my computer at a place where I did not have internet access. I could always access those files if I chose to have it available offline. And then document reuse, that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more later, but the fact that the same document can show up in multiple different ways means that we don't have to keep multiple documents in various locations just so that other people can find it. I mentioned earlier, let's say if I were saving a document that was related to a project and also related to a particular customer, well, where do I save that document? Do I save it in the project folder or the customer folder? Well, to me, it may make sense to save it in the project folder, but someone else in the company may go looking for documents based on the customer and not based on the project. They're either not going to find that document or they're going to have a harder time finding the document if they have to look for it in a different way than I do. So what usually happens in a folder situation like that is 2 or more copies are created. One in the project folder, one in the customer folder. Everybody can find it the way that they want to. But you now, of course, have a big problem that there are multiple copies of that file. One of the copies gets changed and the other one doesn't, and then people start working off of old or incorrect versions or copies of that file. So mFiles prevents that by handling the versioning for you and making that document available through various views, all based on that same document. So we don't have to have multiple copies at that point. So as far as starting mFiles, we can start mFiles just from the desktop by double-clicking an Explore mFiles shortcut. We can start it from the notification area by clicking on, double-clicking the M icon down by the clock. And if we go into computer, we will actually see that M drive showing up as a virtual drive. We can just double-click into the M drive to start up the software. This is actually an older version. This is from version 9 of the user interface. So we're going to skip through this, and I'll give you a walkthrough of the interface as we actually start into the software. We've already talked a little bit about saving the documents. We can save documents, emails, save directly from the application into mFiles by choosing File, Save As. There's also an integration in all the Microsoft Office products, Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that's going to allow you to save directly to mFiles. Particularly in the Outlook integration, you can just drag and drop to folders in Outlook and get it into mFiles. You can also right-click files at any point and choose Add to mFiles. You can drag and drop, copy and paste. Anything that you would normally do with Windows Explorer, you're going to be able to do with mFiles as far as getting files into the mFiles environment. Okay, we're going to skip through these exercises just because that's some of what we're going to do in the software live. And everything that I was just saying about getting an individual file into mFiles, you can also do with multiple files. So if you had 2, 3, or 100 files that you wanted to move to M files at the same time, you could just drag and drop those, specify some metadata, and then it will ask you if you want to say OK to all or just OK. OK to all will use the same metadata for all of those files, or you can click OK and define the metadata one at a time, depending on how you want to specify that information. All right, so we're going to skip this exercise. Saving email messages. Same thing. I mentioned the drag and drop capability, or the ability to right-click the document or right-click the email in Outlook and save it directly to the vault. Also just a drag and drop capability as well. So we're going to wrap up. We're hitting templates now. We're going to wrap up the PowerPoint, and there's a couple of questions that I can respond to. If anyone has any other questions now that we've completed this part, feel free to ask those, and we will kind of change gears here as to moving into the software. So there was one question, says functionality with EAIC. I am not sure exactly what you're referring to there. If you can clarify that one, maybe I can give you a better answer to that question. Another question, what are the specific direct competitors to M-Files? One real competitor to, and I know what you're asking as far as document management, but I do want to put this out there because it's the truth, and I say this to people a lot. A real competitor to M-Files is Windows Explorer and choosing to do nothing. People are used to it. They've done it for a long time. They know it. They may not want to put additional money out there. They may not want to go through any type of change. Now, we've talked about high user adoption, easy changes, etc. That doesn't mean that nothing is changing, and the very idea of changing what's going on can be a real problem for some people, of course. I always say that because it is a very real competitor, and something that has to be that you have to be aware of and be willing to show all of the benefits of M-Files compared to Windows Explorer. On the heels of that, I will bring up SharePoint. At M-Files, we don't really consider SharePoint to be a competitor because it does not have a lot of the features and functionality that M-Files does. But reality and perception can be very different. While it is not in fact a competitor, it can be perceived as a competitor by some people, particularly that already own SharePoint, because they have SharePoint and they say, oh, we don't really need this because we have SharePoint and it can do that. Well, SharePoint could do a lot of things that M-Files can do if you put enough time and money into it. There are still other things that SharePoint will never be able to do that M-Files can do just because it's not architected in the same way. And so I will compare SharePoint to Home Depot versus going out and buying a house. If I go to Home Depot, can I ultimately get a house? Yes, I can buy my stuff there, go out and build it, and get what I want. Now, Home Depot doesn't carry anything and everything that's available out there to build a house. I might need to go to a different store if I can find what I'm looking for, compared to go out and find the house that you like and go ahead and move in and not have to go through the building process and the trial and error and the issues and problems that inevitably you're going to run into. SharePoint, in order to make SharePoint to do what M-Files can do, is going to take into the hundreds of thousands of dollars because SharePoint is marketed as though it can do document management, but it does not have those features and functionality out of the box. It's going to have to be configured and customized, which is going to take people with a lot of SharePoint expertise and a lot of time and money to do that. Now, we do have a SharePoint plugin or a web part that allows you to see mFiles information in SharePoint, and that's one of the ways that we overcome this. We will occasionally lose out to SharePoint, and when I say lose out, I mean it's usually because the people already have it, and so they're choosing not to buy mFiles and instead opting with what they already have. We have had a lot of people come back to us in the future and say, you know, we thought we were going to do this. It turned out to be a lot harder than we thought, or, you know, we have other priorities and initiatives and we just haven't gotten to it because of the amount of time it's going to take. So those are a lot of the ways that that has been overcome in that way. Now let's talk about some of the other competitors I can just throw out. OpenText, Documentum, DocuWare, Laserfish, all of those, Alfresco, all of those are competitors that we run into with varying frequency. We are starting to beat out a lot of those a lot more than we used to. Part of it's because of functionality in mFiles that maybe wasn't there, you know, 2 to 3 years ago. Part of it is just the awareness, the press, and the number of customers that we have that can vouch for it, our capabilities of doing things that, you know, have been further refined. And so we can put mFiles up against some of those big players who have been around for a long time and win against them just because of the features and functionality that we have and the track record. You know, having another 2 to 3 years of a track record means a lot to those customers who are buying the product. Okay, EAIC was External Application Interface Connectivity, specifically when data will be imported from or to SQL, like a database, into web-based software. So we, like I was saying, any database that's ODBC compliant we can connect to. That's one of the things that we'll be talking about in the advanced course is exactly how to configure that. But using the ODBC driver, we can do it directly from the mFiles administrator to connect to those external databases and bring the information in. As far as web-based software or anything like that, we do also have a full API on the Windows side, as well as a REST-like interface for the web services portion. And so we have a lot of people who have done their own integrations with mFiles to other Windows software and to other web-based software using either one of those programming interfaces. So yes, with our database, with other databases through the API, we have a very open exchange of that information pretty much no matter which way you're going. OnBase, yes, that's another competitor, absolutely. OnBase is one that we are starting to run into more and more. So I guess just to recap, if I can remember everything that I did say, OnBase, OpenText, Laserfish, DocuWare, Documentum, Alfresco, absolutely are the top ones. And again, not to put SharePoint or just Windows Explorer out of that mix, because a lot of people are coming to us. You know, we have some people coming to us to replace some of those competitors. We certainly have people coming to us where those competitors are in play, and so these people know that they are going to buy document management software coming from Windows Explorer, it's just a question of which document management software they're going to buy. But then there are the people who feel pains of Windows Explorer or SharePoint, but it can take some convincing in those cases for them to realize that document management or content management is certainly going to benefit them a lot more than they would get from just doing nothing and sticking with what they have. QuickTag. Yes, QuickTag is something that we have run into. That's another competitor. It's not something that comes up a lot. M-File's features and functionality have just swept QuickTag many times. Usually people seem to be looking for a little bit lower end product, I think, when they're looking at QuickTag compared to what M-Files and some of these other competitors that I was mentioning, what they offer. So yeah, QuickTag comes up, but I would not at all put that in the list of top competitors that we see. All right. Any other questions before we jump into the software? Okay. So you should be seeing the desktop of my computer. So this is a demo environment that's running in a virtual environment. For those of you that don't know, we do offer this demo environment to partners. It's for a charge of $350 that we'll deliver on an external SSD drive to you. If you need more information on that or weren't aware of that, you can contact your account manager and they'll be able to discuss it with you. What you get is 3 virtual machines that all function as their own network, with a lot of pre-built vaults and examples that you would be able to easily demo to customers without having to go and set all of this up yourself. So you'll see the SharePoint integration, the web access, of course, all of the client with a couple of vaults, a DMS, just a regular document management system vault, along with a QMS vault. So the QMS is a different product of ours that is for regulatory compliance and SOP management and so on, that is built. It's a specialized vault built within M-Files. And then there are 2 other servers running in that environment. One of the servers is exactly that, just a member server that contains SQL Server, M-File Server, IIS for the websites, all of your normal back-end server functionality, as well as a mail server so that you can see all the notification emails and so on flowing through this network, and then a domain controller. So from an Active Directory standpoint, there's a domain controller where you will actually be able to import those users and groups and play with that in the domain environment. So I would encourage all of you to do that. It's been really useful and helpful to a lot of our partners to have that available to be able to work with just on your own to further learn the software in a controlled environment that's already set up for this, but also to be able to demo it to your customers. And like I said, not have to go through setting it all up manually. Okay, so we're going to start in this demo environment on the desktop. So I mentioned that there were various ways of starting the software. The first being that you'll have a shortcut on your desktop. You'll also see down in the notification area an M icon that we can just double click. It's also in your start menu. under M files, you'll see Explore M files, which is the same as the shortcut on your desktop. And finally, if you just launch Windows Explorer, if you go straight into Windows Explorer to Computer, you'll see the C drive and the M drive. I always like to show this just to kind of drive the point home to show everyone how this works and functions within the Explorer environment. This is not the way I usually start it, though. Typically, I will start M files off of my notifications area, because if I just double click it, it takes me right to my vaults. Or I've also put a shortcut down on my taskbar, and I can just click that and it takes me right to my vaults. But again, I'll show you this so you're aware of the drive integration. So here you see your C drive. Of course, can double click into this just like normal. But the M drive, if I double click into the M drive, it takes me to the vaults, just like if I had gone to the M files environment from the notifications area or from the taskbar, etc. Alright, so what you see here are multiple vaults. In a typical customer environment, you're only going to have a single vault. That's because the way we control permissions, it's really not necessary to have multiple vaults. You're going to be able to keep HR and accounting and project and every other type of information you can imagine in a single vault and still control who has access to it. So the vault structure is not really about enforcing permissions. It would be about completely separating data. For example, if you had multiple organizations on a single server, or truly different implementations or applications that you had. Now, I have multiple vaults because this is a demo environment where I have that DMS vault, which is just regular document management. I also have the quality management system that we were talking about a few minutes ago, as well as some other specialized demos for Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics GP, HR, and so on. So in this training, we will typically just stay focused on the DMS vault, which is our document management system. If I only had one vault and I came into M files like I was describing from the M icon down here or off my taskbar, it would have taken me directly into this vault without me having to go through that other process of choosing a vault. So most customers are not going to see that additional step in there. So once I'm in the vault, for any of you who were aware of version 9 or saw the screenshot in the other presentation, you'll see why I saved the walkthrough of the interface to now, because it is quite different from version 9. Functionally in the client, a lot of it is the same. There are some additional features on the client side in version 10, feature-wise. Now, as to what it looks like, it's very different, and that does lend itself to some new features. A lot of the features that came out in version 10 were on the back end as to implementation, administration, and so on. And then on the front end, what you see here, it gave a much cleaner interface, kind of brought a lot of things together in one place. And this new structure is really going to be a building block for our future versions. Versions, 11, 12, and 13 coming out over the next 2 to 3 years. This is really put in place a structure, an underlying structure that's going to enable us to do things with the interface that were not possible with the way it was designed previously. So this just kind of updated and modernized it, but it was not all about appearance. Some of it is about functionality as to what's going to be possible in some future versions coming up. Okay, so let's start kind of a walkthrough of what we're looking at. So over here on the left-hand side, we have the task area. This is just a quick access area to be able to create documents quickly or other objects. We're going to talk about those objects a little bit more in a few minutes. But a customer object, a project object, an employee object, and so on, we can create all of that either right here from the quick access area. You can also get to it off of the new menu. Some of the things that are in the new menu you will see right here in the quick access, but that's exactly what this is quick access. So there are other options available on the new menu that may not be available in quick access. And the same thing over here on the far right, you have the ability to create new objects right here, which you could also do from the new menu, or some of those could be in the task area. So several different ways to get at this. I could also right-click and choose new and create any of those new objects. So lots of ways to get to that point. Under the Go To section, you'll see we can go to Home, which takes us to this home screen right where we are. So if I were to go into certain views, looking at reports, etc., I could always back out just like I can in Explorer, or click on Home over here to the left to get there. Now, I just mentioned Explorer. Remember that anything that you're doing in M-Files, you are working within an Explorer window, which means up here at the top you do have that address bar. And as we go into various views and so on, you can see where you're navigating and you can back out. So we can go backwards or forwards just like you normally do in Windows Explorer. Right-click menus are also available to give you access to a lot of things that you may be familiar with from Windows Explorer, like how you open files. You can make copies, cut, paste, delete, rename, and so on. But then there are going to be a whole lot of specialized functions in here for M-Files that we'll also look at. Some of the other special views over here are assigned to me, checked out to me, favorites, and recently accessed by me. So let's talk through those a little bit. Assigned to me and checked out to me, those are some specialized views that you can get to right here in the task area. You will also be able to get to here in the main listing window if there is something assigned to you or if you have something checked out. If something is assigned to you, that could be that it was manually assigned to you, or perhaps it came to you through a workflow. In something being checked out to you, that's just something that you have checked out and have locked for editing. Maybe you're making some modifications to it at this point. The purpose of these being visible in the listing window is so that when you come to the home view or just start up M-Files, that it functions as kind of a dashboard view where you can quickly see what's in progress or something that you need to be working on. So if you look at, now if I click on Assigned to Me right now, there's not going to be anything in there, and I know that because back here in my home view, I'm not seeing an Assigned to Me. If I were to have something assigned to me, it would show up in its own view right here. But as I said, being kind of a dashboard, it's going to let me know certain things that I have in progress or certain things that I need to take care of that are assigned to me that I may need to approve or edit, review, something along those lines. There's also a favorites view and a recently accessed by me. Favorites works exactly like Internet Explorer or any other browser where you can mark something as a favorite and then it will show up in that favorites view. So if I go to my favorites, you'll see that I have 2 documents marked as a favorite, and over here in the metadata window you'll see that that star is highlighted. So I could turn on or turn off something appearing in my favorites just by clicking that star. So you see when I clicked the star, it disappeared from my favorites view. If I go back into a particular document and mark this one as a favorite, it's going to tell me that it did it. And if I go back to my favorites view, I can now see that that company brochure is showing up as a favorite now. That's a really nice feature if you want to be able to quickly turn on or turn off a favorites functionality, which is going to allow you to quickly jump to a particular document without having to search for it or go through views. If it's something that you frequently use and want easy access to, then I'll just put it in your favorites list. You see, compared to Windows Explorer, you are not having to make a copy of that file and put it somewhere that's easily accessed by you. You're simply creating putting that, you're kind of assigning metadata to it to say, hey, this is a favorite of mine, so that it shows up in that view for you and you don't have to go find it. Another thing that's really useful is the recently accessed by me. These are files that you would have worked with within the last 30 days. So if you've accessed that file in the last 30 days, it will show in this view. Now, you could probably relate to that if you think about how many times you have ever worked with a file, you need to get back to it. In Windows Explorer, you may not remember where it was. Now, you could go into the application that you used and, just choose recent documents from there. But, sometimes that's not the way that you're getting to it. You may already be in Explorer. In this case, if you're in M-Files, you can go directly to recently accessed by me and jump to that file without having to search for it or go back through views. So this is a really easy way to navigate without having to remember or know much about the file that you were working with previously. So a question was just asked, can we set a document to be worked offline? So yes, you can do that with any document or a view. So if you want to do it on a document basis, then if you right-click the document, you can choose offline availability to mark for offline availability or remove it from offline availability. What that's going to do is whenever you log out of the vault, it will make a localized copy of it on your machine so that it's available to you whenever you're not connected to the internet. Once you reconnect that vault online, it will then sync any of those changes back into the vault, and it's going to manage all of that for you. So you don't have to tell it to sync it, you don't have to copy it back to the network or anything. All of that will be taken care of for you. Now, I mentioned that you could do that with an entire view. Personally, what I do is if you look under other views, one of those views is favorites. What I've done is I right-click that view and I mark it for offline availability. That means that anything that is marked as a favorite will automatically be available offline. So I don't have to go through and mark individual files as I go to be available offline. All I have to do is mark them as a favorite, which takes care of me online or offline. But because I marked them as a favorite, I know it's also going to be available to me offline at the same time. So kind of kill two birds with one stone that way. So again, you could always do that by marking an entire view. You might do that by marking an entire customer view. If there are certain customers or certain projects and so on that you work with frequently, you might do that for the entire set of customers files or the entire set of project files and be able to carry that with you when you go. This feature is still a big feature. It was certainly a big feature 1 to 2 years ago. It is kind of diminishing nowadays just because internet access is so prolific. I mean, you can find Wi-Fi almost anywhere you go, and so it's becoming less and less common to even be offline, is that whether it's a computer, tablet, etc., you're able to connect it online almost anywhere, and so it's almost like you can be online with the vault most of the time. But of course those times do exist where you may be offline, and so yeah, you can absolutely take it offline anytime you want to. Okay, let's start talking about views. This is something you've heard me mention several times. We've talked about it as far as one of the differentiators and part of what makes M-Files different, particularly compared to Windows Explorer, but also very much compared to just other document management systems overall. So we've talked about the idea that M-Files is location independent, meaning we're not concerned with where we're storing it. We're just storing it in M-Files. We're more concerned with what it is and what metadata is being assigned. Well, I mentioned earlier that these views are really just saved searches. Well, what that allows us to do is to define a view or define a saved search that tells us, or we tell it, what we want it to show us. So I could tell it in this particular case that I want it to show me documents, and I want it to show me the documents by the class or the type of document that they are. Or I want to see all of my documents by the customer they're assigned to, or by the project they're assigned to, or only a certain type of document like purchase invoices, or just the type of document broken up by the year and month that they're assigned to. Now you can immediately see from looking at that, if I were to create a folder structure for proposals by year and month, that means I'm constantly going to have to be maintaining a folder structure of the years and the months of that year. So let's say we just came into 2014, that would mean that I have to create a 2014 folder, and then I have to go create 12 folders inside of that for each of the 12 calendar months. Well, M-Files is going to handle all of that for us because it's looking at our metadata. And if we say that we want to see it by year and month, then it's going to create the year and month virtual folders for us. There's another term to be aware of, is the virtual folder. The virtual folder is actually created and destroyed on the fly based on that metadata. So if a file fits the criteria, it will create that folder to view it in. If it does not fit the criteria, then that folder will not exist. So let's look at some examples of that. If I go into this documents view by class, here we'll see a virtual folder of all of the different classes of documents or the different types of documents that exist in this vault. So if I go into the agenda virtual folder, I will now see all of my agenda type documents. And it could be any of the document any of the documents created by any application that there are. These could be agendas that were created in Word or Excel, or somebody put a PowerPoint together. Here you see that something's in a PDF. So it's not the type of document here as to like the file extension or the application that created it, but just that class or classification of document. So here I might find all of my drawings. These are a bunch of AutoCAD drawings. Or I might see my contracts, all of my contracts and agreements. I might see my proposals, for example, all of my different proposals as Word documents or a PDF document. So all of this is available, broken up exactly the way I want to see it. And again, if you were doing this in Windows Explorer, you would have to have a proposal folder. Now let's take a proposal, sort this by document date so we find something that's more recent. So proposal 7735. Now we can see over here on the right-hand side the metadata for that. So proposal 7735 is for customer A&A Consulting, and the document date is 2/3. We are also looking at a particular project, an effective through date, and so on for this particular document. Now, being that it is a proposal and that it is associated with that particular customer, I'm looking at it in this folder that says by class for proposal. Now, what if I wanted to look at it by customer? So if I were to go into by customer and look at A&A Consulting, there is also my proposal 7735. So you should immediately recognize that we are not looking at two different copies of this file. We are looking at the same copy of the file in two different ways. Because it has this metadata for the customer and the metadata for the proposal, we're able to filter it out or look at it based on those tags. Remember that I mentioned earlier that putting the documents in here was just like putting them in a bucket and then putting the tags on there. So this particular view where we look at documents by class is saying, show me all of these documents by the different tags of the document type that they are. And so here I only want to look at the documents that have a proposal tag on them. Then that's the way that I see it. If I, however, were to say I want to see all of my documents based on a customer and I only want to see the ones that have A&A Consulting as the tag, then that's the way I see it. I still only have one copy of that document in that bucket, but I'm pulling it out multiple times depending on exactly how I want to see it. In this case, I'm wanting to see it by customer, so that's how I pulled it out. If I wanted to see it by project, and actually, let's see, because I don't remember which project that was, 7735 was for hospital expansion. So if I go back to documents and want to see it by project, then I look at hospital expansion, and again, there is that same file. We're looking at it three different ways, but it's only in there one time. That is a huge benefit of M-Files, is being able to look at one copy of the document, but to see it in as many different ways as we might want to. So if you consider employees across an entire organization where some people need to view the documents by the project and some need to view it by the customer, some just want to see all the proposals that have been generated, period, without breaking it up by a customer or project, everyone is able to do that exactly as they need to without having multiple copies of it. So you can easily jump to what you need to see exactly the way you need to see it and not affect the way someone else needs to see it or keep those multiple copies. So the benefits, the beauty of the views is to be able to define a view or define that save search and pull this information out in the way you need to see it. Another one that's down here, the proposals by year and month that we already mentioned. If I go into this, you'll see these various virtual folders, and I mentioned that these virtual folders can be created and destroyed on the fly based on the metadata. So I want to go into this February 2014 virtual folder, and I'll see that proposal 7735 because it had a document date of 2/3, so February of 2014 is exactly the folder that we're finding it in. So what I'd like to do is go in here and change this from February to March. Let's just put a document date on it of March 17th of 2014. Now if I save this, we're going to see that it disappears sorry, the expiration date cannot be earlier than the document date. Okay, that's a good thing. So let's make it expire March 31st. So now we've got document date of 3/17 and it's expiring 3/31. So let's save that, and we see that it disappears from this view because the view said February of 2014. That document is no longer showing in this view because it does not meet that criteria. So let's go back to the proposals by year and month, and we'll see that we now have a folder, or a virtual folder in this case, called March 2014, and our February 2014 has been removed. That's where it was created and destroyed. This one was created, the other one was destroyed on the fly based on that metadata change. So if I go into March 2014, we'll see that that proposal is now in this virtual folder with the correct metadata on it. But if I go and I change this, let's say I change it back to January, we put January 15th as a document date and save it. Again, it disappears from this virtual folder, but if I go back to proposals by year and month, we'll see that January 2014 now exists when it did not exist a minute ago, and March 2014 has now disappeared. So going into January 2014, there's the proposal again. I wanted to show you all of this so that you understand how the virtual folders are used. They are used to break up and group anything in M files that fits the criteria. So first of all, we're looking at a view of proposals by year and month. That's telling us what we want to filter. I want to be able to see all of my proposals, but then I'm going to break them up by the year and month that they exist, and so it then starts showing me these virtual folders with those documents in the folders as it happens to meet that criteria. Okay, someone is asking, will we still be able to see the created date? Yes, so if I go in here and I click on that file, you'll see right up here, the upper right-hand corner, the created date and the user, and the last modified date and user. So I am changing the document date, which might be the date that I want. Let's say I created the document today, but I want the document date right here as metadata to be March 1st. Well, I could do that basically just creating it ahead of time, but I don't want it to be effective until March 1st. Then maybe I want it to be effective through March 31st. So these are just metadata dates that you can control that are relative to the document and relevant for the document. But up here, it's keeping that created and modified date for me separate and apart from that, so I have the ability to control all of it. Okay, any other questions right now about the views or the virtual folders? We are going to talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to go into some document creation, but I wanted to see if there are any other questions before we go that route. Okay, looks like there aren't any questions right now, so we'll continue on with creating some documents. So whenever this was on the diagram that we did before, was looking at how to get some documents into M files. First of all, I mentioned that we could just drag and drop. So let me find a document out here that I have in a folder on my desktop. I could always just drag and drop that into M files, just like I would to Windows Explorer, and it's going to pop up this metadata card asking me how I want to save it. Now we're going to come back to fill in a metadata card in a minute when I go to save another document, but that's really all there is to it as far as dragging and dropping documents to get them into M files. So I could do that with a drawing file, just like that. It's going to pop up metadata card, and I could do it with, you know, a PDF or a Word document, etc. It's all going to function exactly the same way. Now, we also talked before about dragging and dropping or copying in multiple files. So you'll see if I do this, this is where, actually I don't want to do that because that's asking if I want to convert a TIFF file. So let me grab a couple of PDFs. So if I drag and drop those, you'll see that I can specify the same metadata, but now I get the option to just create or create all. If I were to click create all, it would save the same metadata for each of these files. I would be able to specify the metadata once, and it would go in there for as many times as I am copying the files in. So that's a quick overview of how we could get some electronic documents in here that don't exist already. Let's go and create, or I'm sorry, that do exist already. Let's go and create a brand new document. So we can do that in a couple of different ways. Directly from M files, I can click on new document and tell it what type of document this is going to be. So let's say I wanted to create a sales invoice. I have a sales invoice template here as an Excel spreadsheet that I could use. I could also just make it a blank document if I wanted to do it that way. I could create another document, for example, like a contract or an agreement. And again, I could base that on a template, or I could create a blank document. So a lot of different ways that I could create it here. I might also say that I wanted to create a proposal. And if I were creating a proposal, I might use the template, or I might just do a blank document. This is if I wanted to generate it directly from M files because I'm already in the software. I can do it a little bit differently by specifying the document type and then the application that I'm going to create it with. I could also do it the more normal or traditional way by just starting the application to begin with that I would type this information into. So let's say that I'm going to create a proposal, and I'm going to create it for A&A Consulting is my customer, and I'm going to create it for the Austin District, if I can spell that right, redevelopment project. And let's say that Sandra is going to be my contact over there. So I want to save this document. Now in a Windows file structure with Explorer, I could come up here and click my save icon or choose File Save As. With M files, I mentioned that there's an integration into all of Microsoft Office. That's what you see right here is my ability to save to M files. So here I could choose the vault that I want to save it to. So that's an option for me. Just to show you that I can still do it a normal way, I'm just going to click my save icon, and you'll see that I'm defaulting to save to my M drive. I just have to choose which vault I want to put it in. And again, in a normal customer situation, I would not even have to choose that vault. Just choosing M files as the M drive, it would go straight to that vault since I wouldn't have multiple vaults. At this point, I might specify a file name. I happen to know that my proposals are going to be automatically named by mfiles, so I really don't even need to waste my time naming this file because it's going to do it for me. So I'm just going to click Save at this point, and here again it's going to pop up that metadata card in mfiles for me. So this is asking me what type of file is this. Now remember, if we were doing this in Windows Explorer, we would be going about this a different way. We would have chosen the save icon, but I would have had to choose which folder it's going into, and I'm going to have a dilemma at this point because I know that I'm saving a proposal, so I might just save it to a proposals folder. I also know that it's for my customer A&A Consulting, so I could save it to that customer folder. I could also save it to the project folder for A&A Consulting because this is for the Austin District Redevelopment Project for them. Or I might save it into a folder for Sandra, who is my contact at that company. There is no wrong answer to this. The right answer is to save it in the folder that makes the most sense for me, maybe, but what if other people are going to access this file as well, which is probably the case? Then I need to kind of take all of that into consideration. And in a Windows file folder situation, the way I might do that is to save this file at least 4 times in each of these folders, and so now I've created this chaos of all of these files that are not hooked together, and anyone could go modify any one of those copies, and now the other 3 are going to be out of sync with it. So this is where we overcome this in mfiles, is that when it asks me for the class or the type of document, I can either choose from the drop-down list. You'll see that I can choose under Purchasing and Sales, Proposal, or I could just start typing it and it will filter and autofill the list for me. Once I choose the type of document that it is, you'll see that it's going to ask me, or it's going to prompt me for this other metadata. Now this is the centralized structure that we were talking about before that is controlled from the mfiles administrator and created by the administrator or the person who's administering the system. So it's been determined that for proposals, this is the information that we want to be prompted for. The document date and the customer are the only required properties, and you'll see that because they have the asterisk beside their name, in addition to the class and the proposal title. Now the class or the type of document is always going to be required. The proposal title was made as a required field for this type of document, and then the document date and customer as well. So that's all I have to provide. I can provide as much of this additional information as I want to. I could even add other properties to it if I wanted to do that. So this is what I'm prompted for because I chose proposal. But notice that if I had chosen, let's say, contract or agreement, the metadata that I'm prompted for is totally different. And that should make sense to you, is that if I'm saving a proposal, I may want to know certain information about that proposal that is very different than the information I want to know about a contract. That may be very different than the information I want to know about an invoice that I receive from a vendor, and so on. So the whole point here is that the type of document is driving the data that we want to save about the document, so that it's prompting us for relevant and valid information as we move through the process. So going back to proposals, since we know this is a type of document this is, we can put in the document date. Let's go ahead and save it for today, being the 25th. The customer we know is for A&A Consulting, and the project we know is Austin District Redevelopment. So right here I've captured proposal, A&A Consulting, and Austin District Redevelopment in the metadata in probably less than 5 seconds. Now, I can guarantee you I can't save this file in Windows Explorer in a single folder and make 2 other copies of it in 5 seconds. But I've already done that in my save process right here, just from choosing from the drop-down list of typing in proposal, choosing the date, the customer, and the project, all from drop-down lists very simply. The other information that I have right here is that Sandra is my contact. You'll notice I don't have a contact property over here, but if I wanted to do that, I could come in here and click Add Property, find the contact person property, and choose who I want this to be. Now, I put Sandra in here. Sandra is not a contact at this company. I have a couple of choices. I can either change this in my document, or I can add Sandra as a contact person. I'll just show you, if I wanted to add Sandra as a contact person, I could easily click on Add Value. It brings up a new screen for contact person, and it's going to associate Sandra. I don't know her last name, so we'll just put an A, and it's going to associate her with that customer. So now I could choose her from the drop-down list. Well, let's say, hey, I thought the contact was Sandra. It's not, so I need to change it to the correct person. Let's put in Jeff Smith as the contact and go ahead and create it. And let's go ahead and, so we're going to create it. We're going to check the document in. And so we've saved the document, classified it, and closed it, and gotten it checked in. Now that checkout and check-in process, a document starts as checked out. You have to physically check it in. And what that's doing is controlling the editing process. So how could I get back to that document? You know, I've saved it with about 4 different pieces of metadata. Now, how could I get back to the document very easily? Well, one of the absolute most easy ways to do it would just be to go to Recently Accessed by Me, because I don't have to know anything about the file in order to get to it that way. So there's my proposal 7736. Notice that it assigns the number for me, and so that's when it named the file. That's why I didn't even bother naming the file coming out of Word, because I knew that my proposal was going to get named for me. I just let it name it and didn't bother doing it on my own. So it generates this number for us and then can use a naming convention. So that can help give some consistency to your files that are saved on your network. So I found it real easily just going to Recently Accessed by Me. Another thing that I could have done from my home view is look at my documents by class, and I know that it's a proposal document. So I can come in here and quickly find it with the reverse sort order on the document date. I could also, from my documents view, look at it by customer. I know that it is associated with A&A Consulting, and there it is showing in that view. I also know that it is associated with the project, Austin District Redevelopment, and here it is right here. So I've just found it through Recently Accessed by Me, Proposal, Customer, and Project, all very quickly, because I know that information. I only saved the document one time and classified it even quicker than I could have if I had drilled down into multiple folder structures. So when we talk about the user adoption, once people see that, that's where it is very easily adopted, because they're able to access it in multiple ways, classify it in multiple ways, and really do that in less time than if they were drilling down through a structure, through a folder structure. All right, now we know that there's something wrong here. I associated this with Jeff Smith as a contact person, but that's not the name that I put in the file. So I want to modify this file. So I'm going to double click it to open it up, and it asks me if I want to check it out or just open it read-only. Now, this is where I want to check it out because I know that I want to make modifications to it and I want to lock it down for editing by anyone else. So I need to come in here and change Sandra to Jeff, what was his name? Jeff Smith. Alright, so we're going to type Jeff Smith in here, save the document again, close it, and check it back in. So now we have Jeff Smith in the metadata, and Jeff Smith is also in the document contents as it should be. Now, I have saved that document twice. What I want to point out is that if we look at the history right here from the task area, or right-click it and choose history, is that now we have two different versions of the file. The first version contains Sandra. The second version contains Jeff Smith. So if I were to open the second version, let's check it out, I will see that Jeff Smith is in that metadata. Let's check it back in. However, if I open up version 1, which this is just telling me that it's read-only, I can actually access that first version of the file and it still shows Sandra. What that means is that I still have access to all of the versions that exist. It doesn't matter if I have 2 versions, 100, or 1,000. I could have all of them and be able to jump back to any prior version. So let's say that, I've changed this to Jeff Smith, but now Sandra really is the correct entry for that. I could take this version 1 file and roll back to it. And what that's going to do is create a version 3 based on version 1, and I can see that now because it puts it in the comments that I rolled it back to version 1. So I now have this version 1 or version 3 file based on version 1. So if I open up version 3, we're going to see that it does in fact have Sandra's name in there. And I could also come over here to the metadata now and change it to Sandra because I know that that's actually the correct information for it. Something else that we'll find now if we look at the history is that it's not just version 3, it is now version 4. Not because we changed the file itself, but because we changed the metadata of the file. So if we look at version 3, we'll see in the metadata that the contact person is still Jeff Smith. If we look at version 4, we'll see that the metadata now says the contact is Sandra A. So it's going to make different versions of the file not only by the contents of the file, but it's also going to do it by if we were to change the metadata. Now I've just shown you several different ways that we can find that file by going through various views. Let's look at different ways that we could find it just by searching for it. So let's say we don't really know very much information about this, but we know that the name Sandra was in the file. So if we search on Sandra, we will find 3 files, 2 contact people, and 3 projects. This is the proposal that we were after, so it immediately comes up in our search results. Notice also that in the metadata, Sandra's name is highlighted. And if we click on a preview of the document, we'll also get a good preview of the document over here in this pane that is also then going to have a highlight on Sandra's name. So it's highlighting it both in the metadata as well as the file contents. It also found Sandra as the contact person. If we were to drill down on that, we would be able to see that Sandra belongs to A&A Consulting, and that there is also one document associated with Sandra, which happens to be the same document that we were looking for. So we don't just have to find the document through the documents section. We can find the document by other things that it's related to, which is exactly what we were getting when we went through the views and virtual folders. But here we're looking at this contact object that it's associated with. And I said we were going to come back to this object concept again. An object in M-Files is just this entity. It's the thing that we are saving metadata for. So a document object or a document entity is a really quick and easy thing to understand. It's equivalent to the piece of paper or the Word file or the scan document, whatever it is that you brought into M-Files that you're looking at as that document file. You're saying, okay, this invoice or proposal or contract, I want to save certain information with it. But realize that that document that is an object that you're saving the information for could just as easily be a vendor or a customer or an employee that you also are saving information for. So I have certain information about my customers, like their name, address, phone number, website, email address, and so on. Or my employees is a name, an email address, maybe a social security number if we're talking about an HR system. My vendors could have a vendor number, a net pay terms, things like that. All kinds of information that we track about other data, other entities like that, and so we can do the same thing with them in M-Files. And that's where the power comes in of bringing information in from other data sources like our ERPs, CRMs, HR systems, project management. If we can bring those projects into M-Files and bring the customers and the contacts and the employees and so on into this interface, it not only makes it available to classify as metadata, which we've already seen over here, just to pick it from a drop-down list, but realize that because we've associated this with Sandra, I can now look at Sandra's contact information, which might also have her job title, telephone number, email address, and associate it with that document. In the same way, we know that A&A Consulting is the customer. So let's just type in consulting up here, and we come up with a bunch of documents because we have a lot of documents related to A&A Consulting. Here's the proposal that we've just been working with, but if I scroll down and look at other objects or entities that are saved in here, we find Sandra A because Sandra A is associated with A&A Consulting. We also find the actual A&A Consulting customer and all of the documents, all 37 of them, that are associated with A&A Consulting. These are the same 37 documents under the customer heading that we find up here. It just so happens that we return 3 additional documents up here because they contain the word consulting. So they may not be associated with A&A Consulting, but maybe with just because they contain the word consulting. And then, of course, the project, Austin District Redevelopment, we see that as well because it is linked to this particular customer and has documents associated. So I wanted to show all of that because of the just the expansiveness of the ability to search for this information. I think you can see very quickly that saving one document with 4 pieces of metadata gave me probably 10 different ways to find it. Easily just going to those metadata views by themselves, but also searching on particular terms. Something that we didn't point out that we could talk about is that when we did this search, the default search criteria is going to search in the metadata and the file contents. So that means, for example, looking for the word consulting, it brought up these search results if the word consulting is in the metadata, meaning any part of the file name or these properties, but also if it was in the contents of the document itself. So looking for proposal as an example, there's 7736 again. It's finding it in the metadata, but it is also finding it in the contents of the document. Okay, there's another question saying, if we searched for Jeff Smith, would that proposal come up? And the answer is no, because it is not part of it. That was actually in one of the previous versions of the document. So it's only going to search in the current version of the document by default. Now, we can come in and say, look in all versions, in which case it would do that, but notice that it says that this does not apply to the quick search, which is what we're doing up here. So I could check that box and research for Jeff Smith, which is not changing our results. But I could come in, well, and actually that really does answer that question, because Jeff Smith should be found in the file contents, and so we're not going to find his name down here in any one of the properties. See, this would allow us to search in any one of the properties of the document or any of the metadata properties, but as far as the file contents is concerned, that part is only going to search for in the latest version. Now, I just remembered when we saved the document, we did save Jeff Smith to the metadata. And so that means we should be able to find under contact person. So if we say contact person is Jeff Smith, and let's take this out of the quick search. So we want to search contact person as Jeff Smith, and under additional conditions we told it to look in all versions. Then we should find that proposal, and yes we do. It's showing right here, but you see that it's in version 3. And if we check this, sorry, not properties, if we check the history, we'll see that we last saved it as version 4. So version 1, version 2, and version 3 all contain Jeff Smith in the metadata. It's going to show us the last version right here. It's looking in all versions, which means that it can go back to any prior version, but it's showing us the most recent of those prior versions that contains that metadata. That's a good question. Believe it or not, I have not had anyone ask me about searching into the prior versions before, but yes, that is completely possible. All right, we are basically to the end of our session. Here, someone has asked another question. As I spoke in the opening of how these multiple versions of documents do not take up size as they would with Windows. How does it work? Is it part of a later or advanced training? It's actually something that we're going to talk about a little bit more tomorrow, but just to give you the gist of it, what mFiles does is it only keeps the changes as it goes from one version to the next. So it's going to keep one copy, so it will keep the copy of the original file, and then as we go to version 2, 3, 4, and so on, it's only keeping the changes from that. So if I had a 1 megabyte file in Windows and I keep 10 versions of it, it's going to be at least 10 megabytes. But in mFiles, it would be 1 megabyte plus the sum of those changes. So if I only changed one character in one version and one word in another and one paragraph in another, then however much space each of those changes take up from one version to the next, plus the original version, would be the total of that. So what this will show you, if you look at the history of it, if we go back in here, and there have been some versions in here that will show a size column. I will typically keep that hidden just because I'm not particularly interested in the size. But you'll see right here that the various sizes, this is not how much space all of it is taking up on disk. This is the size that it would take up on disk if we restored back to that version. So you might have seen that there was another column in here that says size on server all versions is 31K. So you can see that that should be 13, 26, 39, and 15 would be, what, 54K? It's only taking up 31K. So it's keeping the differences between all of the versions. That's the file contents and the metadata changes, is that it would be a total of 31K for all versions of this file. And then, of course, the other column that was on here said size on server this version. So this one is taking up 13, this one 15, this one 13. Now this one right here is actually not taking up any space because we didn't change anything about the file itself. We only changed metadata in this particular case. So it did not change anything as to the document size. So restoring back to that one, well, that's our current version, is only taking up 13, which is from these two previous versions right here. So, yeah, well, you said it's doing an incremental save. It's doing really a differential save. So when mfiles looks at the versions, it's saving the difference from version 4 to version 3, the difference from version 3 to version 2, and then you see the resulting, almost kind of the resulting overlay of those, essentially, is what it puts together. We'll talk about this tomorrow too, but mfiles is not changing the format of the files. It's saving them as bin files, but it's not changing the format. So it is all still available in its native format. A Word file is saved as a Word file. Excel is saved as an Excel file. It's just managing the version aspects of that in the background. So if you ever want to pull those files from mfiles, you can pull them and just get that latest version with no problem. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for now. We'll take a 2-hour break and come back at 1 o'clock Central. I am going to shut down the webinar itself. So a little bit before 1 o'clock, I will restart it, and you can rejoin this webinar just by clicking the same link that you clicked to join it in the first place. And so hope you have a good break, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. Thanks.